The signal that changed everything. Captain Elena Vasquez was hauling mining equipment between Jupiter's moons when the signal reached every human communication device simultaneously. She watched her cargo manifest flicker and disappear as an alien broadcast took over her ship's main screen. The message was simple but terrifying. The Galactic Dominion had issued a challenge that would determine humanity's fate forever. Elena set her coffee cup down with trembling hands as she listened to the alien voice peeking through advanced translation technology. Every intelligent species in the galaxy had to prove their worth through combat. One champion would represent their entire civilization in a fight that would last mere minutes but decide the future of billions of lives. The aliens had been watching Earth for decades. They knew about human wars, human weapons, and human fighting techniques. They had studied every boxing match, every military operation, and every martial arts tournament. The Galactic Dominion believed they understood exactly what humans could do in combat. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Earth's desperate hour. Back on Earth, emergency meetings erupted in every major capital. President Sarah Chan convened the United Nations Security Council within hours of receiving the alien transmission. Military leaders, scientists, and diplomats gathered to face the most important decision in human history. General Marcus Thompson stood before the assembled world leaders with grim determination. The aliens had given humanity exactly one standard galactic year to choose their champion. The winner would gain their species membership in the Galactic Dominion, along with access to advanced technology and interstellar trade routes. The loser would watch their homeworld become a quarantine zone, cut off from the rest of the universe forever. The selection process began immediately. Every nation contributed their finest warriors, Olympic athletes, special forces soldiers, and martial arts masters all volunteered to save their species. Training camps opened across the globe as thousands of candidates prepared for the trials that would determine Earth's representative. But deep in a classified facility beneath the Colorado mountains, Dr. James Mitchell was already reviewing files on a different kind of candidate. He had been secretly preparing for this day for over 15 years. The hidden truth. Elena Vasquez had no idea that her entire life had been carefully orchestrated. She believed she was just another cargo pilot working the outer system routes. Her military records showed standard service in the Earth Defense Corps, with nothing particularly remarkable about her performance. The truth was far more complex. Elena had been selected at age 12 for a program so classified that only a handful of people knew it existed. Project Synthesis had been designed to create the perfect human warrior by combining traditional combat training with something completely unprecedented. While other fighters learned one martial art or specialized in single combat styles, Elena had spent 20 years mastering fighting techniques from every known alien species in the galaxy. Earth's intelligence services had been collecting combat data from across the stars for decades, analyzing the fighting styles of dozens of different civilizations. Elena had learned to fight like a Krugan berserker, using pure rage and overwhelming force. She had mastered Zentari precision striking, where a single perfectly placed blow could disable opponents twice her size. She understood Vorthak dimensional combat, fighting in ways that seemed to bend space itself. But the most important part of Elena's training was something no alien could replicate. She had learned to combine all these different fighting styles with uniquely human adaptability and innovation. The journey begins. When Elena received orders to report to Earth Defense Command, he assumed it was just another routine cargo assignment. She had no idea that her name had been submitted as humanity's champion without her knowledge or consent. Admiral Rebecca Foster met Elena in a secure briefing room and explained the situation. Elena listened in stunned silence as she learned about the alien challenge, the galactic tournament, and her role as Earth's only hope for survival. Elena's first reaction was to refuse. She was a cargo pilot, not a professional fighter. She had never competed in tournaments or sought out combat. The idea of representing all of humanity in a fight that would determine the species' future seemed impossible. Then Admiral Foster showed her classified recordings of alien combat techniques. Elena watched beings from across the galaxy demonstrate fighting abilities that seemed to defy physics. Some moved faster than human eyes could track. Others wielded energy weapons that could slice through steel. A few seemed to manipulate reality itself during combat. Elena realized that everything she had learned during her military service had been preparation for this moment. Her cargo runs to remote stations had actually been training missions. Her routine combat exercises had been tests of abilities she was still discovering. Meeting the opposition. The journey to the neutral combat zone took 3 weeks aboard Earth's most advanced spacecraft. Elena used the time to study detailed files on potential opponents from dozens of different alien civilizations. Each species brought their own unique advantages to combat. The Krugen were massive humanoids with natural armor and incredible strength. Their champion was a warrior named Tok the Destroyer who had never lost a single fight in over 200 battles. The Zentari were energy beings who could phase in and out of physical reality. Their representative could become completely intangible, making traditional attacks useless. The Vortak were masters of technology who fought using advanced weapons and armor that enhanced their natural abilities far beyond normal limits. Elena studied each potential opponent carefully, but she was most concerned about the Dominion's own champion. The aliens who had issued the challenge came from a species called the Executors. They were tall, thin beings with 4 arms and the ability to process information faster than any biological brain should be capable of. Their champion was something called the Perfect Weapon, a being that had been genetically engineered and cybernetically enhanced specifically for combat. It had studied every known fighting technique in the galaxy and had access to weapons technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans had developed. The arrival. The combat station was a massive structure floating in empty space between star systems. It had been built specifically for this tournament and was large enough to house representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. Elena's transport ship docked alongside vessels from dozens of different worlds. She saw ships that looked like living creatures, others that seemed to be made of pure energy, and some that followed design principles completely alien to human understanding. Walking through the station's corridors was Elena's first real exposure to galactic civilization. She passed beings that towered 3 meters tall and others that were barely knee-high. Some communicated through color changes in their skin, while others used telepathic connections that made nearby humans feel uncomfortable. All of them stopped to stare at Elena as she passed. She was smaller than most of the other champions, and her simple Earth-made clothing looked primitive compared to the advanced armor and weapons carried by other representatives. Elena could hear whispered conversations in dozens of alien languages. The universal translators built into the station meant she could understand every word. The other species were making bets on how quickly the human would be defeated. Most gave her less than 30 seconds. Final preparations. Elena's quarters on the combat station were simple but comfortable. She had 3 days to prepare for the tournament, and she used every minute to finalize her strategy. The combat rules were straightforward. Single combat in a zero-gravity environment with no weapons except what fighters brought with them. Victory by incapacitation, submission, or death. No time limits and no outside assistance. Elena spent hours in meditation, reviewing every fighting technique she had ever learned. She visualized combat scenarios against each possible opponent, planning combinations of moves that had never been used in actual battle. The other champions were also preparing, but they were doing so in ways that followed predictable patterns. The Kruken was lifting massive weights to build even more strength. The Zentari was practicing phase-shifting techniques. The Vortak was testing advanced weaponry. Elena was doing something completely different. She was learning to think like her opponents while maintaining her human unpredictability. She was preparing to fight not just with her body, but with her mind and spirit in ways that no other species could understand. The night before, on the final evening before the tournament, Elena received a private communication from Earth. It was a message from every major world leader, but also from ordinary people who had heard about her mission. Children had drawn pictures of her winning the fight. Scientists had sent calculations showing optimal combat techniques. Military veterans shared advice about staying calm under pressure. Elena realized that she was not just fighting for herself or even for Earth's government. She was fighting for every human who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered if they belonged out there among the galaxies. She fell asleep that night knowing that in less than 24 hours, she would either secure humanity's place in the cosmic community or doom her species to eternal isolation. The aliens had spent years preparing for this tournament. They had studied human combat techniques and believed they understood exactly what Alina could do. Tomorrow, they would discover that humans had been preparing too. And humanity's greatest strength was not their fighting ability, but their capacity to exceed every expectation when everything they cared about was at stake. Alina Vasquez was about to become either humanity's greatest hero or its final failure. In 30 seconds or less, the entire future of human civilization would be decided by one woman who carried the hopes and dreams of 8 billion people into battle against the unknown. Dawn of Judgment. The morning of the tournament arrived with artificial sunrise lighting that filled the combat station's corridors. Alina woke before her alarm and spent an hour in silent meditation, centering her mind for what lay ahead. She could feel the weight of 8 billion human souls depending on her performance in the next few hours. The combat station hummed with activity as representatives from 43 different species prepared for the day that would reshape galactic civilization. Alina dressed in her simple black combat suit, deliberately choosing no armor or visible weapons. Every other champion would be expecting her to rely on technology and equipment, just like their own species did. Alina's strategy was built on misdirection and surprise. Let them underestimate the human representative. Let them believe she was unprepared and outmatched. Their overconfidence would become her greatest weapon. The arena unveiled. The combat arena was a sphere of crystalline walls suspended in the center of the station. It measured exactly 100 meters in diameter and was completely transparent, allowing spectators from every direction to witness the battles within. Advanced force fields would contain the combat while protecting observers from stray energy blasts or debris. Alina studied the arena's features during her pre-combat inspection. The interior was completely empty except for small gravity generators placed at regular intervals. Fighters could activate local gravity fields to change their orientation during combat, creating three-dimensional battlefield dynamics that most species had never experienced. The arena's walls were made from compressed neutronium, the same material found in neutron stars. They could withstand planet-destroying explosions without taking damage. Whatever happened during the fights would be contained within that crystalline sphere. Alina noticed that the gravity generators responded to biological proximity sensors. She could potentially use them not just for movement, but as tactical tools to disorient opponents who were not expecting sudden shifts in gravitational orientation. Gathering of Champions. The other tournament participants assembled in a vast observation chamber that surrounded the combat arena. Alina found herself standing among beings that represented the peak of galactic civilization's combat capabilities. Top the destroyer stood nearly 3 meters tall, his natural Krugan armor glistening under the station's lights. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where physical strength meant survival. Thok had never encountered an opponent he could not simply overpower through brute force. The Zentari champion appeared as a shifting pattern of energy and light that occasionally solidified into a vaguely humanoid shape. It communicated through harmonic frequencies that made nearby beings feel dizzy. The Zentari could become completely intangible, making conventional attacks useless. Near the chamber's center stood the Vorthak representative, a being encased in powered armor that enhanced every aspect of its combat capabilities. The armor included energy shields, projectile weapons, and scanning systems that could analyze an opponent's weaknesses in real time. But all eyes eventually turned to the Dominion's champion, the perfect weapon. It stood exactly 2 meters tall with 4 arms and skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its movements were precise and economical, betraying no wasted energy or unnecessary motion. Alina could feel the perfect weapon studying her with senses that went far beyond normal vision. It was analyzing her muscle tension, heart rate, and breathing patterns to build a combat profile. Every other species had provided decades of combat data for analysis. Humans were still largely unknown. Psychological warfare. As the champions waited for the tournament to begin, several alien representatives approached Alina with what appeared to be casual conversation, but was actually sophisticated psychological warfare. A draconian noble with scales that shifted colors based on emotional state spoke to Alina through the station's translation system. The draconian's words were polite, but the underlying message was clear. Humans were a young species with no significant combat achievements. Alina should consider withdrawing rather than facing inevitable humiliation. Alina smiled and responded in the draconian's native language, which she had learned during her classified training. She thanked the noble for their concern and mentioned that humans had always performed best when everyone expected them to fail. The draconian's scales shifted to colors that indicated surprise and concern. Most species required advanced technology to learn foreign languages. The fact that Alina could speak Draconian fluently suggested that human intelligence capabilities were more advanced than previous estimates indicated. Word of Alina's linguistic abilities spread quickly through the observation chamber. Several species began reconsidering their assumptions about human preparation and capability. The rules of engagement. High Arbiter Zinth, the ancient being who supervised galactic tournaments, addressed the assembled champions in a voice that resonated through dimensional frequencies. The rules were simple but absolute. Single combat between designated champions. No outside assistance or interference. Victory achieved through opponent surrender, incapacitation, or termination. The battle would continue until one participant could no longer fight. Weapons and equipment were limited to what each champion could carry into the arena personally. No remote-controlled devices or external power sources. Each fighter would succeed or fail based on their own abilities and preparation. The tournament would proceed through elimination rounds until only one champion remained. That being species would gain full membership in the Galactic Dominion with all associated rights and privileges. All other species would be relegated to observer status for the next galactic cycle. Alina listened to the rules while calculating tactical possibilities. The no external assistance rule meant she could not rely on Earth-based support or technology. Everything would depend on her training, her adaptability, and her ability to think faster than opponents who had been preparing for this tournament their entire lives. Strategic analysis. During the hours before combat began, Alina withdrew to a private meditation chamber and reviewed everything she knew about potential opponents. Her training had included detailed analysis of 43 different alien combat styles, but theory was very different from actual battle. The Kruken fought with overwhelming physical power, using their natural strength to crush opponents before tactical considerations became relevant. Alina's advantage would be speed and precision. She could not match Krugen's strength, but she could potentially avoid their attacks while targeting vulnerable points that their species had forgotten existed. The Zentari presented a more complex challenge. Their ability to phase between physical and energy states made conventional attacks ineffective. Alina would need to time her strikes for the brief moments when they solidified to interact with the physical environment. The Vorthak relied on technological superiority and tactical analysis. Their armor provided significant advantages, but it also created dependencies. Alina had studied their technology during her training and knew that even advanced systems had vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone who understood their design principles. The perfect weapon was the most dangerous opponent because it had been specifically created to combine the advantages of multiple species while eliminating their individual weaknesses. It represented the culmination of thousands of years of combat evolution. Alina's strategy against the perfect weapon would require her to do something that no other species had attempted. She would need to evolve her fighting style during combat itself, adapting faster than her opponent could analyze and counter her techniques. Mental preparation. Alina spent her final preparation hours in deep meditation, accessing memories from every aspect of her training. She reviewed thousands of combat scenarios, visualizing potential battles against each possible opponent. But more importantly, she connected with something that no alien species possessed. Alina drew strength from her connection to humanity itself. She thought about children playing in Earth's parks, about scientists working in laboratories, about farmers growing food, and about artists creating beauty. Every human activity contributed to the collective strength that Alina would carry into battle. She was not just fighting with her own abilities. She was fighting with the accumulated creativity, determination, and adaptability of her entire species. Elena also prepared mentally for the possibility of failure. If she lost, humanity would be isolated from galactic civilization for potentially thousands of years. Earth would remain alone in the universe, never knowing what might have been possible among the stars. That possibility filled Elena with determination that went beyond personal survival. She was fighting for humanity's future, for their children's children, and for the dreams of every human who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered what else was out there. The final countdown. As the tournament's opening ceremony began, Elena took her place among the other champions in the preparation area adjacent to the combat arena. Thousands of alien spectators filled observation decks that surrounded the crystalline sphere where the battles would take place. Elena could see Earth's small diplomatic delegation in one of the viewing areas. They looked nervous and hopeful, knowing that their species' future depended entirely on one person's performance in the next few hours. The opening ceremony included traditional challenges and rituals from several major galactic civilizations. Elena watched as representatives from different species demonstrated their combat capabilities in carefully choreographed exhibitions. When her turn came, Elena simply stepped forward and bowed to the assembled spectators. She performed no demonstrations, showed no weapons, and gave no indication of her combat capabilities. The alien audience murmured with confusion and concern. Elena's restraint was deliberate. Every move she made was being analyzed by opponents who would face her in combat. The less information she provided, the more difficult their tactical preparation would become. Moments before battle, the tournament brackets were displayed on screens throughout the station. Elena's first opponent would be determined by random selection, but she would eventually face every surviving champion in sequence until only one remained standing. Elena closed her eyes and entered a state of perfect mental calm that her trainers had called combat consciousness. In this state, her awareness expanded to encompass every aspect of her environment, while her reaction time accelerated to superhuman levels. She could hear her heartbeat, feel the air circulation through the station's life support systems, and sense the emotional tension of thousands of alien spectators. Elena was ready to fight not just with her body, but with every aspect of human evolutionary development. The other champions were also making final preparations, but they were doing so according to predictable patterns developed by their species over thousands of years. Elena was about to introduce an element that galactic civilization had never encountered before: pure human unpredictability combined with training that incorporated the best combat techniques from across the galaxy. The arena's entrance portal opened with a sound like distant thunder. Elena stepped forward, knowing that the next 30 seconds would either secure humanity's place among the stars or doom her species to eternal isolation. She had trained for this moment for 20 years. Now it was time to discover whether human determination could overcome the collective combat wisdom of 43 alien civilizations. The perfect weapon enters. Elena floated in the center of the crystalline combat arena, surrounded by the transparent walls that would contain the most important battle in human history. Through the neutronium barriers, she could see thousands of alien faces watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. The entrance portal on the opposite side of the arena opened with mechanical precision. The perfect weapon glided into the combat space with movements that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Its four arms moved independently, each one carrying different types of advanced weaponry that had been specifically designed for this tournament. Elena studied her opponent carefully during the 30 seconds before combat would begin. The perfect weapon stood exactly 2 meters tall with a humanoid body structure that had been optimized for combat efficiency. Its skin absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making depth perception difficult for opponents who relied on visual targeting. Elena was writing new patterns as she fought. The 15-second mark, halfway through what would become the most famous 30 seconds in galactic history. Elena had disabled half of the perfect weapon's weapon systems and neutralized its primary analytical capabilities. But her opponent was far from defeated. The perfect weapon activated combat protocols that had never been tested in actual battle. Its movements became less mechanical and more fluid as it accessed emergency adaptive algorithms designed to learn new fighting techniques during combat itself. For a few seconds, Elena found herself facing an opponent that could match her adaptability. The perfect weapon began to predict her movements and counter her techniques with increasing accuracy. This was the moment Elena had trained for during thousands of simulated battles. When facing an opponent that could adapt as quickly as she could, Elena would need to access the deepest levels of human combat potential. She stopped thinking about fighting techniques and started fighting with pure human instinct, pure human spirit. Elena's movements transformed completely. She was no longer using alien combat techniques or established fighting patterns. She was fighting with something that no other species in the galaxy possessed: the human capacity to transcend their own limitations when everything they care about is at stake. Elena moved like water, like fire, like wind, like lightning. She seemed to be everywhere and nowhere, attacking from angles that should not have existed, defending against strikes that had not yet been thrown. The perfect weapon's adaptive algorithms could not process what they were encountering. Elena was not just using unknown techniques, she was fighting in ways that seemed to violate the fundamental principles of combat physics. The alien spectators watched in stunned silence as their greatest champion was systematically dismantled by a human who seemed to be rewriting the laws of combat as she fought. The final 10 seconds. The perfect weapon made one last desperate attempt to victory. It activated every remaining weapon system simultaneously and deployed its ultimate technique: a quantum disruption field that should have disabled any biological opponent instantly. Elena flowed through the quantum disruption like it was gentle rain. She had learned to fight not just with her body, but with her spirit, her mind, and her connection to every human who had ever faced impossible odds and found a way to survive. Elena's hand moved toward a point on the perfect weapon's neck that no scanning system had identified as vulnerable because it was not supposed to exist. But Elena was not targeting anatomy that appeared in any galactic database. She was targeting something that only humans had learned to perceive: the connection between consciousness and physical form that every living being possessed, but that only humans had learned to manipulate through pure determination. Victory. Elena's fingers touched the perfect weapon's consciousness interface with pressure so gentle it would not have damaged delicate flower petals. But the touch carried behind it the collective will of 8 billion humans who refused to accept that their species did not belong among the stars. The perfect weapon, the greatest combat creation in galactic history, fell unconscious without understanding what had happened to it. The combat arena fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Elena floated in the center of the crystalline sphere, breathing normally and showing no signs of injury or fatigue. 28 seconds had passed since the combat signal sounded. The aftermath. The silence lasted for exactly 30 seconds before chaos erupted throughout the combat station. 43 different species tried to process what they had just witnessed. The human representative had defeated the perfect weapon using techniques that did not exist in any galactic combat database. High Arbiter Zint's voice carried tones of confusion and awe as it announced Elena's victory. Humanity had earned membership in the Galactic Dominion through combat superiority that no one had thought possible. Elena exited the arena to find thousands of alien representatives waiting to meet her. Species that had ignored Earth for decades were suddenly very interested in establishing diplomatic relationships with humanity. Elena smiled as she realized that the tournament had been just the beginning. Now that humans had proven they belonged among the stars, they would have opportunities to show the galaxy what human creativity, determination, and adaptability could accomplish when given access to advanced technology and interstellar resources. The new beginning. 3 months later, Elena stood on the observation deck of Earth's first interstellar spacecraft, watching alien ships escort them toward humanity's new home among the galactic community. The cargo pilot who had once hauled mining equipment between Jupiter's moons was now Admiral Elena Vasquez, commander of Earth's Galactic Integration Fleet. The aliens had prepared for years to defeat humanity in combat. They had studied human fighting techniques and believed they understood exactly what humans were capable of accomplishing. Elena had won in under 30 seconds by showing them something they had never encountered before: the human capacity to exceed every limitation when fighting for something more important than their own survival. Elena looked out at the stars and smiled. Humanity's greatest adventures were just beginning. The galaxy was about to discover what 8 billion humans could accomplish when they set their minds to exploring the infinite possibilities of the universe. The tournament had lasted 30 seconds. The consequences would reshape galactic civilization for thousands of years to come. Humanity had proven they belonged among the stars. Now they were ready to show the galaxy what they could build there.